So this session delves into the historical socioeconomic significance of glass beads from the 16th century onward, highlighting the impacts that surpass our common understanding. How can European and indigenous perspectives offer differing views on these interactions, revealing disparities and imbalances in power and regimes of value? The session examines how these exchanges, often orchestrated by European economic power structures, are intertwined with the local economic interactions of various communities around the world. Additionally, the session touches upon broader philosophical questions of value, examining how worth is assigned and traded. Now I'd like to introduce you to our panel who will speak to this topic through their respective disciplines, research, and scholarship. You can find the panelists' full bios in the program. Karin Pallaver is an associate professor of African history at the University of Bologna, where she teaches African history and Indian Ocean history. Denise Ferreira da Silva is a philosopher and artist. She is currently the Samuel Rudin Professor in the Humanities in the Department of Spanish and Portuguese Languages and Literatures at New York University. Denise. Alexandra Ksenia Nagaubau is Anishinaabe and Kanien'kehá:ka and a member and citizen of Whitefish River First Nation with maternal roots in Kanawaki Mohawk Territory. Nagaubau is a faculty member at Carleton University, cross-appointed with the Department of History and the Institute of Comparative Studies in Literature, Art, and Culture. So each of these panelists will speak to the topic for about 15 minutes. Then we will move into dialogue with the entire panel and then wrap up the session with an opportunity for questions from the audience. Now I will pass it to Karin for our first talk. Thank you.
Thanks, Dion. Thank you for involving me in this project. What I will try to do in this brief talk is to touch upon some of the nodal points of my research on the history of glass beads and their use as money in 19th century East Africa. And what I would like to start from is the first nodal point that made me thinking a lot, that is the perception of glass beads and how glass beads are perceived in different places of the world. So let me start with these two quotations. The first one is from a French traveler, Monsieur Valéry, who visited Venice in the 1820s. And he described the local production of glass beads as an industry that provides the mediocrity with the shimmer and upper luxury of the rich, and frivolous, like the fabrication of fashionable items that cannot be a viable resource of a country, as it does not satisfy any real and lasting need. Well, he was definitely wrong. On the one hand, because he seemed to ignore that glass beads were very important for the Venetian economy, especially in the 19th century. Glass beads and the export of glass beads to international markets supported the local economy. And on the other hand, he ignored that glass beads were not only used as ornaments by many societies of the world, but they were used as money, as currency. Second quotation is from East Africa, 1850s. Richard Francis Burton, the famous British explorer, he was in the interior of present-day Tanzania, traveling in search for the sources of the Nile. And he was questioned by local chiefs in Western Tanzania about what they called Uzungu, that means the land of the Wazungu, land of the Europeans, that they described as the mysterious end of the world in which beads are found underground. So with this question, they gave a sense of this mythical origin of glass beads, and at the same time of the fact that glass beads were rare in East Africa and were abundant somewhere else at the beginning of the commodity chain. Glass beads are in many ways the quintessential example of what Europeans traded with Africa defined as trinkets or as knickknacks, so goods with no value that Africans exchanged with what were far more precious goods, ivory, gold, and enslaved people. And this fueled what the Africanist historian Philip Curtin defined the Jugo myth. So this idea that Africans were economically naive and unable to understand what had a value and what had not a value. Objects and commodities, as we know, change their meaning and their value according to the specific place, the historical period, the society in which they circulate and in which they are used. Because societies do have different regimes of value that are connected to the materiality of these objects, to the uses that are made of them, to their connection to political power. So let's make a parallel between two commodities. The first one is ivory. Ivory, why ivory? Because ivory was the most important commodity that was exported from East Africa in the 19th century to the global markets, to North America, to Europe, to India. And in East Africa, before the 19th century, ivory had no economic value. It was used to make kitchen tools or to create stockades around houses and villages, but it has no symbolic or economic value. On the contrary, in the 19th century, ivory became more and more in demand in Europe and in North America because it was used to make card figures, parts of instruments, combs, billiard balls, and so on, these objects became symbols of a high standard of life for the growing middle class in 19th century Western world. And so they were connected to social and economic power as well as to political power. Here on the left of the slide, you can see this beautiful throne that was donated by the Maharaja of Travancore in India in 1851 to Queen Victoria, and this became the centerpiece of the 1851 Great Exhibition. And when Queen Victoria became Empress of India in 1876, she asked to be photographed in Windsor, sitting on that throne for the official picture for the day. And so in Great Britain, ivory was connected also to political power, as it happened also in many parts of the African continent. On the right of the slide, you can see a very famous example of a throne that is made with glass beads and cowrie shells. This is the Mande Yenu, the royal throne of Bamum in Cameroon that is now at the Humboldt Forum, that was gifted in 1908 from King Ibrahim Njoya of Bamum to Kaiser Wilhelm II. He made a copy of the original one and he kept the copy and gave the original one to the king. So in Africa, in West Africa, in South Africa, in East Africa, in many parts of the continent, glass beads became, among many other things, also symbols of power. Having beads meant having political power, and we will discuss this later on. I believe that these perceptions that come from the past still today inform our perception and our understanding of the uses that societies around the world made of glass beads. And what made me studying the history of glass beads in East Africa was really one of the reasons was to deconstruct these perceptions and to see what actually people in East Africa did with the tons of glass beads that were imported in the area in the 19th century. Yes, this one, thank you. You can see from this picture, this is a bead book in which there are the pages with bead sample cards that were given to commercial agents, especially Venetian commercial agents who operated all over the world, in the African continent, in India, there were in North Africa, East Africa, West Africa, that they used to match the production side and the demand side. They showed these bead samples to African traders, and they selected the beads that they wanted. So it was a way to inform the production in Venice according to the demand coming from global markets. And always European travelers and traders lamented the fact that the taste of African people for glass beads in terms of their color, their shape, their size, changed abruptly. And they attach blame to African women. Here you can see a quotation from Henry Morton Stanley, another explorer who traveled in East Africa, who compared the tastes that African women had for beads, and he defined them as fastidious tastes, similar to the taste that women in New York had for jewelry. Also, this continuous need for comparison, and this idea that the changes in the demand were connected to fashion and to the tastes of African women. I think that this is another myth that goes hand in hand with this Jugo myth. And we can call it the ornament myth. So the idea that beads were only used to create ornaments. Of course, their use in the creation of ornaments is a very important component of their value, but it is not the most important one. The most important one is their being used as currency. The word conteria in itself, the origin of the name conteria, and here in the bead sample you can see these are seed beads, conteria for export. The meaning of conteria derives either from the Latin contus, that means ornament, but for other, the origin of the name is from contare, in Italian, to count. So this gives a sense of the double lives of beads, so ornaments and money. And this is what interests me more from the point of view of my research. So the use of glass beads as money in 19th century East Africa. And I have tried in this map to sketch the areas in which glass beads were used as money, and they were used as money together with other currencies, especially cowrie shells and imported cloth. That is not in the map, but imported cloth was imported from the United States, and it was called Americani in East Africa. Actually, glass beads fit almost all the standard criteria that economists attribute to money. They are durable, they are impossible to counterfeit, they are homogeneous, they are aesthetically pleasant, they are imported items, and this means that the amounts in circulation could be naturally limited and dependent on trade. Also, glass beads could be used to create standard units of currency in East Africa. They were put on strings of a fixed length that was called kete, that was from the thumb to the elbow and back. And this made them very suitable for trade, because traders did not need to count beads one by one, but they counted them in strings. And finally, beads had a very low unit value. And this means that they were very suitable for economies where also prices were very low in the markets. We have evidence of traders buying a small pot of water with one glass beads, so very, very small value. So what glass beads did in the 19th century was entering a complex system of long-distance and interregional trade that connected the interior regions of East Africa to the coast, to the global markets. And that was based on the export of ivory for the international markets as well as for enslaved people. And of course, in this expansion of trade, Africans wanted money in exchange for the goods they exported. And glass beads, having all of these characteristics, served very well as money together with other currencies. They were used to buy export goods, such as ivory and enslaved people. They were used to pay porters, because a characteristic of the region was that there were no rivers that could be used to transport goods, and also draft and pack animals could not be used because of that tsetse fly that is fatal to draft and pack animals, and so porters were used to transport goods, and they were paid, in glass beads and cloth, but they also needed to be feeded along the way during these caravan trips that lasted several months. And they received a daily allowance of a string of glass beads, because glass beads, having this small value, could be spent in the markets. Also, glass beads became important in social payments. They were employed in bride wealth payments, and they became also symbols of social status, as we have seen the throne before. And also, they became a way to accumulate wealth. So a powerful person, a powerful trader, had a lot of beads. As we mentioned before, the type of beads in demand changed according to the region where the traders were coming from. And these traders met in the most important markets along the caravan roads. You can see some names here on the map, like Ujiji, Tabora, Mpwapwa, and so on. And what happened in these markets was that traders created a currency, a type of a currency that was a type of bead that mediated all commercial exchanges in the market. I'll try to explain it better. Traders arrived from different regions where different types of beads were in use: yellow, blue, red beads. They met in the market, big markets where all traders met, and there were money changers who exchanged these different types of beads with just one type of bead that served in the market as a recognized currency. In the market of Ujiji, it was in use this bead called Sophie that was probably similar to that one. It was cylindrical with those white, red, and blue color. So this is just to say that this was a very sophisticated monetary system that was made by traders with very little intervention of political authorities. And it worked very well. It was suitable for the economy and for the the way in which people exchanged goods. The one with this one. Very briefly, going back to the imperialists and another nodal point of my research, that is gender. We see the importance and the role of women in these global trading connections, both at the beginning of what economists call the commodity chain, that is the production in Venice, and the end of the commodity chain, that is the consumption and use in East Africa. In East Africa, actually, women were those who handled glass beads because they took care of small trade. So they produced food and sold food to the caravans, whereas men were more involved in long-distance trade and the export of ivory, and enslaved people that were generally paid in cloth. And so women were those who were more involved in the use of glass beads as currency. And at the same time, Venetian women were those who made the production of glass beads in Venice flexible. And so a production that could be easily adapted to the changes in the demand, because women were hired on a temporary basis in this piecework for stringing and selecting the glass beads and preparing them for exports. And they made possible for Venice to become a global currency supplier, because the production could be made flexible by employing the impieraresse, so women laborers. Final point, thank you. That is the other thing that interests me in my research. That is the impact that European colonialism had on these monetary systems, pre-colonial monetary systems. And in East Africa, that was colonized both by the British and the Germans, it was very difficult for the colonial state to replace existing currencies, because simply the currencies that the Europeans introduced, colonial coins and banknotes, were not suitable for the local economies and for the ways in which people used money. And so what happened was that they tried to introduce many coins, and all of them failed. So in 1906, the British attempted to replace glass beads and cowrie shells in Uganda with these coins. And in all the correspondence, there is this idea, derogative idea, that Africans were people without pockets. And so the reason why they didn't want colonial coins that were according to the British, more civilized mediums of exchange, show that they were primitive and that they did not understand the use and value of money. And so they said that these people without pockets need a currency that they can use in the same way as they use glass beads. And there was a lot of debate about the possibility of introducing new coins with a hole in them, so that people could put them on strings, as they did with cowrie shells and glass beads. And the problem for them was that they had the portrait of the king on the coins. And they said it is not possible, it is politically inconvenient to make a hole in the king's head. But it was, but at the same time, having the king on the coins was something that was important, because it was a way to create a new link of authority with the colonized people. But they were so preoccupied of making Africans to accept their coins that they decided to take off the portrait of the king and replace it with a hole. So this gives us a sense of the limited reach of the colonial state and the ability of the colonial state to impose its monetary system, and shows a process of adaptation to local monetary practices on the part of Europeans. Thank you.